Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A real pleasure to be able to speak to you today. Thanks so much for taking the time. I guess just by way of introduction, some people are going to be, completely up to date with the show, with the series. Some people might not be. So maybe you can just set the scene for us a bit in terms of where this sits in the sort of Tolkien timeline. I believe it's, a few thousand years before the events of Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, et cetera, et cetera. So, where does the show sit in that timeline?
So the show is based out of the appendices from the Lord of the Rings, which were the kind of footnotes and things that Tolkien wrote in all his work. He was kind of famed for having these expansive universes and worlds that he created. Obviously, I think most people are familiar with the main book, the Lord of the Rings, which then the Peter Jackson films are based on, which is in the Third Age. Our stories are in the Second Age, so it's a couple of thousand Tolkien years, Middle Earth years before that. And it's basically, in a nutshell, the whole series is the story of the rise of Sauron and the forging of the rings of power, hence the title of the show. That is a big focus of this season 2, which is obviously out tomorrow. But there's all sorts of stories alongside it with some brand new characters and some very familiar characters to people who have seen read the books or seen the Peter Jackson films about how those rings come about and what effects they have on the world of Middle Earth.
And where specifically do we find the story, find the characters at the beginning of season 2, and what is in store for fans who are excited to tune in this week?
So season 2 starts with, obviously this is a big spoiler if people haven't seen season 1, but hopefully they've caught up by now. Season 2 starts with the return of Sauron. He's back, it's confirmed, it's kind of feared by the end of season 1, and obviously once you've seen the big twist at the end of season 1, we know that it's him and he's back. And basically we're going to start with seeing the effects of it on all corners of Middle Earth, even the areas where you wouldn't think it would be affecting them quite yet. We've obviously got what they set up so beautifully in season 1 is all these different worlds and all these different races of people. So we have the dwarves and the elves and the Harfoots and the orcs and so on. And we're going to see how Sauron's return has kind of effects that seep through the whole of Middle Earth, and directly and indirectly have effects on everyone as his evil and his influence spreads. My world, which is the world of Adar and the orcs, is most closely associated with Sauron in the later films. In this stage, he's obviously not quite directly had so much influence yet, but we start to see how he's got his eye on the orcs as a potential army, and on Mordor, which has also been formed in season 1. We saw how Mordor was created, which was an amazing story that they set up, and we kind of see how Sauron has his eye on that as well.
Coming to your character of Glug, I mean, of course, not that easy to recognize you under all these absolutely insane and incredible prosthetics. When you had the opportunity, I mean, I understand you've been playing different orcs in season 1, right? But then you're coming on as a specific character in this one. So you had a little bit of groundwork there. What was it like taking on this character?
This was this is kind of indescribably special, I have to say, to have a character like this. So it's a pretty unique experience to be able to play already so many, like, multiple characters in a show like this. I think kind of credited characters, I had 5 orcs, I think, in season 1. So some of whom were named and kind of popped up throughout. Some of whom were just kind of dying orc who came in, as the orcs often are. They pop up, they maybe say a line or two, they get shot with an arrow, they disappear. Which is, kind of the fun of the orcs that we're used to. What was so beautiful about this one, the showrunners basically got in touch and said, look, we're writing an orc with an arc, was their phrase that they coined. That is a nice little soundbite. And we'd love you to come back and play it for us. So I was obviously thrilled to be thought of and be considered for that. And yeah, it's very special to be able to not just come back and be asked to come back. I also still played some other little characters that may pop up here and there, but to play this orc that has a journey, that has a bit of a storyline throughout, because it's one of the first times that's happened really where we see an orc that has what I suppose we can call an emotional journey throughout the story and such involvement in the plot without just being kind of cannon fodder, you know? And what's so beautiful about what they've written for this series, and with Glugis Adar, his right hand orc, his right hand man, kind of second in command. He's a fierce warrior. He's a leader of the orcs, so he's pretty well respected within the orc community. But we also see that he has a kind of more depth to him than we're used to seeing in the orcs, in that he has some other motivations too, and he has basically what we'll see in season 2. He has what we might consider a family or a kind of clan, or some kind of offspring that depend on him. And we kind of see how that adds an extra layer to the orcs to drive them. Glug kind of represents a lot of the orcs. We kind of see that they're not just kind of rabid and out for blood. They actually have their own motivations too. Now they have a home in Mordor, which is what they've been looking for. They could just settle. And so we kind of see the conflict between going to battle and fighting for Adar and just being able to settle now that they have a homeland that they've been looking for so long. So it brings us a kind of interesting dynamic to the orcs that we've never really seen before.
I remember thinking, actually, when we first saw, the original Peter Jackson films, and even when you go back to them now, and I think one of the things that's really stood the test of time is the fact that they really went to town and making everything seem very tangible, particularly with the orcs. And and what I love about the show is they've really stayed true to that, because of course you have all this CGI, at your fingertips that you could potentially use, but everything seems very real and right there in front of you. I mean, it must mean a lot of time in the makeup chair for you and for your colleagues, but do you think that's something that just really adds to the magic and adds to the sort of grounded realism, despite being in this fantasy world?
100%. I think it feels like it's all real and tangible because it pretty much is. I mean, obviously there's loads of incredible VFX work in the show, which the VFX supervisor Jason is in charge of. We'll see some beautiful creations, but what's so incredible is that with the orcs in particular, it's focused on them. Barry Gower, who is head of prosthetics for season 2, came up with this way basically of creating mix and match prosthetics pieces so that all the background orcs, which could be up to kind of 40, 50, 60 orcs, were all in full prosthetics, which normally wouldn't really be possible because of time. They found a way to do it with making the pieces so that everyone could be in these mix and match pieces. And what it meant also is that next time the background are in, they could give them different pieces that all puzzle piece together, and they'd have a different face, but it would be the same actors, obviously. So it was really remarkable, because in the group scenes, we honestly had 50 real orcs, and then they're costumed head to toe. Everyone's got weapons, got armor, got the full prosthetics. They're painted. There's blood dripping everywhere. The sets, obviously, from production design are just kind of the same level. So it was just like an actual army of orcs you'd be shouting at or going to battle with. It was kind of remarkable. Yeah, we had Leith, who I've mentioned was the dialect coach. So she trained us all with some black speech, to how to get the sounds of the black speech, which is another, there's so many amazing languages that Tolkien already wrote, but Leith and someone called Griff, who's the Tolkien historian on the show, added to those languages. And then we had someone called Tallulah as well, who was our movement coach for the orcs as well. So she was invaluable, because she made sure that we had a physicality to the orcs that wasn't kind of comical or silly, but it has this idea that the orcs are these twisted, tortured beings that are kind of constantly in pain, and there's all sorts of different shapes and sizes. So, she made sure we didn't all walk around with the same limp or something. And we all looked the part, created the world.
I remember as well thinking how terrifying they were back in the day, and still terrifying now in the show. Is it the kind of thing you wouldn't want to be sort of last one on set with a bunch of those? Did you ever get freaked out by your own appearance in the mirror?
It's so funny. People always ask that, and I've never had that. I suppose I do with other people sometimes, because you see them and you don't know who's under there. But there's something about our human brains that we're wired, even with contact lenses. I can look in the mirror and I just always feel myself in there. So it is quite funny. But sometimes you do get so tired by the end of the day, you kind of forget that you have it on, and then you go to the bathroom and look in the mirror and get a jump scare. But but yeah, you get kind of used to it. I mean, it was a long job. We did the makeup so many times. Yeah, I kind of missed it when we stopped doing it. I kind of missed the look of him. So it's exciting to see him this week. Yeah,
How many hours was it in the chair, and was it sort of physically uncomfortable? Like you say, maybe you do just get used to it, and you don't even realize you're still wearing it.
It's a funny one. It's not, I wouldn't say it's comfortable, but it's not kind of, you're not in discomfort 24/7. In terms of the time, I was quite lucky with this one because I've done some makeups I've done lots of prosthetics work, over the years. I've done some that are kind of 8-9 hours of makeup before you then shoot for 10 hours. This was about 3 hours because I had a chainmail hood, like a balaclava. So normally you'd have prosthetics like your whole head, front and back. This one I just had the face because I had this hood. So it was a little bit shorter. And also we did it so much that my amazing makeup artist, who was Barry, and a guy called Pat Fode, they're really top of their game in the world of prosthetics. So they got it down to a few hours. And then, yeah, you kind of have it on. It's like you're aware you have it. I mean, it's you've got a layer of rub silicone glued to your face, so you're kind of aware of it. But I'm so used to it by now, and I kind of love the challenge of performing through it. You've got to find a way to still get across this physicality and still get across emotion with all the layers of costuming as well, and try and tell this story. I kind of love the challenge of it. Yeah, I enjoy it.
And what about stepping onto these sets? I mean, I don't know if this is accurate, but it's like one of the biggest budgets for a TV show ever, I think, or, like something crazy like $1 billion or whatever. I mean, it must just be, on the one hand, incredible, but maybe also intimidating, and being there with all this amazing cast and crew. What's your experience more broadly of being involved with the show on that, and to that extent?
I mean, it's kind of remarkable to I've always loved watching crews, watching people on sets, which is, lucky because it's my line of work. But I just think there's something so magical about, you go onto a set and it's kind of this organized chaos while everyone is doing their thing. And you've got obviously art department, you've got the lighting, you've got the sound, and everything's setting up. And then when the moment comes, they call action and the actors get to do their little bit. Everything falls still. You do your line or two or the action or whatever you're doing, and then it calls cut, and the chaos starts again, the organized chaos. So I've always loved that kind of ping pong like that. And on a set like this, it's just so vast. It's just that times 10, So the amount of things that are going on, and the amount of detail and the amount of skill that these people have in every department, it's just amazing. One thing that was particularly amazing from this, just to give an idea of what kind of scale we were on, there's some trebuchets, the big wooden arms that throw flaming boulders that they've popped up in the trailers. They're like implements of medieval war that the orcs kind of also use. They were real. We had real 70-foot wooden trebuchets that worked, that functioned, that I presume the art department or had built, and it actually threw flaming boulders and things. So some of the stuff that people will obviously just assume is VFX in this show, it hopefully gives them a chance to watch it and go, maybe that was real. I don't know. Because there's some stuff where you kind of think, well, that couldn't have possibly been real, and this was. We were literally stood next to this 70-foot structure that was all made from wood and rope that worked like it would have done in them. I don't know when they use trebuchets in this country, but in Middle Earth, it's in our stories. So yeah, kind of remarkable to be near that kind of detail.
And of course, such an amazing cast across the board, particularly Morfydd Clark, in that central role. Mm-hmm. Do you get to spend much time with the other cast? And, I guess even seeing, the likes of her performance from season 1 must have been such a great experience to be working next to all these people.
Oh, it's wonderful. What's so special with this cast is it's such an ensemble cast. There's about 20 kind of leads basically throughout the different stories. But what was so special is that we all filmed season 1 together in New Zealand during COVID. So we were all kind of there during the lockdowns when nobody could leave and nobody could come in. So everyone that was there, we were all each other's little family and little support network during that time there. So everyone got really close during that time in season 1, which was so special. And then to come back for season 2, it was funny really, because we were used to being all in one kind of place in New Zealand. But then season 2, people were back in their own homes, or they were traveling in and out to the UK to film season 2. So it was a bit more spread out. So you saw lots of people in your worlds, because there's all these worlds are quite separate. But then every now and then the worlds will cross a little, as we'll see in season 2, and it'll only happen more and more. So you suddenly got to work with someone you'd never really worked with before or seen on set before. So that was really fun. Mordovith is amazing. She's like remarkable. I did spend quite a lot of time with her on set without giving much plot away. But I saw her quite a lot, and she just brings this kind of elegance and this kind of depth to the character that's, it's a lot of pressure because it's someone we've already seen when Cate Blanchett played it in the films, and she's this iconic character for the Tolkien fans. And yet she just brings this element of fieriness and real kind of emotional depth, I think, to the character it's just so wonderful to watch. And it's quite fun being with her on set, because normally the orcs are literally surrounded by like layers of mud and dirt and black oozy blood, and then she's this kind of shining figure in silver armor and blonde hair amongst us. So it's always quite fun. She kind of really stands out. And
you've, throughout the conversation, mentioned so many of the details of, this world. When you first, had the idea that you were going to be coming on to this show, where did you begin? Were you already really familiar with the books and the previous films? Did you go back and revisit the original source material? Because it's such a rich world. And the fact that you can even have a Tolkien historian, and of course the fan base is just, enormous. So it feels like something you can't take on lightly. You sort of have to go in hook, line and sinker to really play the part.
Yeah, I think you're right. You have to approach it with a lot of respect, I think. So I was familiar with it. I'd read The Hobbit and I'd read the Lord of the Rings books when I was a young teenager. But I went back and read them again just to kind of revisit the story. And then I tried my best to read as much of the other material as I could. So I read some of the Silmarillion and the appendices. What I really dived into, which is most applicable for me, is what Tolkien wrote about the orcs. And I could go on a whole 20-minute speech to you about what Tolkien wrote about the orcs, because I found it so fascinating. But one thing that's really interesting to note, I think, is that he never made his mind up completely about the nature of the orcs, about whether they were irredeemably evil or not. He basically wrote that they were these evil beings that kind of came from Morgoth, who was the original baddie from the first age. We're now in the second age. But he kind of changed his mind a lot about the nature of them, about whether they could be redeemed or not, and about whether the whole nature of evil that played into a lot of his kind of morality and his philosophical writings as well, which is really interesting, which is what I tried to read as much and absorb as much of that as I could while doing this character, because it's directly applicable. They are these kind of inherently evil beings, but they also do just have drives like regular living beings with sentience, and they do even have what we could call maybe feelings. And some fans, I think, will find that jarring, and some fans, I think, will find it really interesting because it gives this extra depth to these characters that are otherwise seen in kind of one light. We're able to shine another light on them and give people something to think about, hopefully.
What do you think it is about this world, about Tolkien's world, that keeps readers and audiences coming back and, I guess, being transported to this completely other world? Yet, of course, there's always things to take for a contemporary audience, and thinking about the human condition and how we behave, and good and evil, et cetera, et cetera. So there's something that keeps audiences coming back.
I think you've got it exactly there. It's so rich and it's so other from us in so many ways, because it's so fantastical. There's magic and elves and giant spiders and all these things that are just not part of our world. So that have that wonderful escapism and richness, and there's lots of nature, which I think is always really attractive. But at the same time, whether we're looking at wizards or orcs or giant eagles or something, there's kind of relatable themes that I think draw people in, about friendship and love and honor and respect and power and evil, and things that people we've always found fascinating in the stories that we tell, from like nursery rhymes to massive epics like this. And I think just the level of love he poured into it, I think, is mirrored by the fans, is mirrored by people who come to watch this material, because he just made this, he clearly just lost himself in this world, and so created it for people to do the same. I think that's really attractive to people. So yeah, hopefully they enjoy season 2 in the same way.
Did you want to just quickly say one sentence about the moustache and what you're doing next?
The moustache, yes, indeed. I'm playing a character called the Marquis de Morez, who was a French aristocrat who went out to kind of try his hand at being a cowboy in North Dakota in the 1880s. So it's a true story, and we're filming out here in the Badlands in North Dakota. I've been here for the last couple of months. It's the most incredible experience, very different from Lord of the Rings, and a lot of fun because it's my own face. So yeah, I feel very lucky to get to kind of play in both worlds.
Thank you so much for sharing all that with me, and really can't wait for season 2 to land and for everyone to be able to dive in. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Enjoy it. And thanks. It's really great to speak.
Cheers.
Thank you.